really appreciate all of you that came out, and I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge that some of our rail union representatives are here in the house as well, so thank you guys for coming out. I know you guys work on this side of the state a lot, and appreciate you driving down. So I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I'm deeply honored to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, and Fort Sumner is like the far eastern edge of our district, and I really feel so lucky and so honored to be able to work with this community. I love this community. I love all of our southeastern communities. We just came from Roswell, and I was sharing with them, my grandma lived in Roswell when I was a kid, so we used to come out here a lot. And especially I love the historic sites of this area, and it's just such a sweet little town. And I was just sharing with somebody, when I first ran for office for this seat after redistricting, I think I canvassed the whole town, but didn't get a lot of people that day. But just really an honor to be here. So I know that folks probably have a lot of questions about what's happening at the national level right now, and I know really truly every single community is being impacted. So I'll do my best to give you a high-level overview of what's going on, how we're pushing back in places where it's impacting people, and also I know a lot of people submitted questions in advance, and so I'll try to answer as many of those questions as possible. And then we'll just open it up if you guys have questions yourselves and you want to add on or add to the discussion. So at the highest level, just in case we've never met and I haven't had the opportunity to introduce myself to all of you, I'm a native New Mexican, born and raised. I was born in Farmington, up in the complete other side of the state. And I was raised primarily in the North Valley and west side of Albuquerque. My family owned an irrigation business, so I grew up digging ditches and laying irrigation pipe. And that's what led me into the world of water. So I spent my professional career doing drought planning and working on water resources issues. My undergraduate's in the sciences, and I went back to school to get a graduate degree in sociology focused on land and water rights issues. And I never intended to go into politics. It wasn't what I saw as my career path, but I have always been interested in how do we help New Mexico's communities thrive, and in a way that honors our cultures and our traditions and the limits of the resources that we have. And I don't need to tell you guys out here that it is a challenging state to help our communities, especially in small rural communities like this, get access to federal funding, to do economic revitalization, to protect our land and water rights. All of these things are the big issues that motivated me to run for office in the first place. And in part because as a native New Mexican, I ran because I genuinely believe in our people. I know that New Mexicans are able to tackle our biggest challenges, even though we struggle. We're smart, we're creative, we have good ideas, we're good with our hands, we're nice, like we can do this. And so I was really interested. I was working, I started my career as a science educator, and I worked in schools around the state, taking kids out to their local rivers and teaching them local water science. And I went back to graduate school, like I said, to study land and water rights. And I had the opportunity in 2010, while I was a graduate student, to go intern at the White House, and I thought I'd go out there for 6 months and ended up staying for 7 years. And so that's how I got sucked into the political world. But at that time, my work was actually not political at all. I had never even worked on a campaign. I wasn't doing politics. I was working on land and water rights and science issues. So I worked for 4 years in the White House. I worked as a nonpartisan federal employee at Office of Management and Budget, and I oversaw budget and management for organizations like USGS and BIA, and so programs that just help our communities, and I love that job, but had the opportunity to go work as a water staffer in the Senate. So I went over to the Senate and I worked and helped to negotiate and write bipartisan water legislation for a number of years. But I moved home in 2017. I ran for the New Mexico State House, same year as Mr. Zamora, so we're classmates. We were both elected at the same time, took office in 2019, did some good work for the state, I'm really proud of some of the work that we did, and we collaborated on some things. We passed the first Water Data Act, we passed legislation to upgrade our grid, a bunch of really good legislation, and I love serving in the legislature. In fact, that was my first time getting to travel the state in that role. And so it's part of, that's the cool thing about serving in our legislature. You get to be on the road and experience all of these places. So I try to bring that to my work in Congress. And in fact, just last week I was talking to the governor, I was just saying this to the staff, and we were telling all the places that we're going for our land grants, and she's like, "You're even going to Fort Sumner?" And I'm like, "Yes, we're going to Fort Sumner." So my work, after I got elected to the State House in 2021, Deb Haaland, who was the congresswoman for Albuquerque at the time, she went to go work as a cabinet secretary, and that was a vacancy for the congressional seat I ran. I won, and then they redistricted, and that's when this whole part of the state ended up getting incorporated into that district. So now our district is huge. It actually goes all the way from Bernalillo and Rio Rancho, and then it goes all the way down. We have Olive, Lincoln County, we have like the northern strip of Chavez County, down to Roswell, and then you guys are at the eastern border up to Santa Rosa. And then there's like a little piece, we pick up some of the Pecos Valley, south of Las Vegas as well. So we have some of the land grants up there, and then all the way back to Albuquerque. So it's a huge district. And it's very diverse too. We've got everything from Sandia Pueblo and Mescalero Apache to Fort Sumner to like downtown Albuquerque. And so that means we got to hear from a lot of different people who have wildly different perspectives on politics and the world and what the heck we should be doing. But the way my office is organized is we're organized regionally. So Brenda has been your rep for a long time, and John, who's sitting in the back, is helping with Eastern New Mexico, and Deshay does our Albuquerque and tribal portfolio. And Felicia's here just as our storyteller and communications person. But what we try to do in my office is organize it so that you have one point of contact for every region, so that you're never like, gosh, I wish the congresswoman knew what we thought or needed. You can always get a hold of Brenda or John here on the eastern side of the state, and they will help with anything you need. Doesn't matter the request, you ask us. So, when I took office as the congresswoman, we spent a lot of time going and listening to the communities to find out what were the important things that our communities wanted us to focus on, and we organize our work in 3 major categories of work. We focus a lot on economic development and infrastructure, with a heavy focus on rural development and revitalization of rural communities. And we've been lucky that during my time here, the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, and so we've been able to bring home hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure money, and also for our rural communities. And we had to initially focus on communities that already had shovel-ready projects similar to capital outlay. But we're helping with a highway project out in Santa Rosa. We're working on we helped rebuild the fire station from scratch out in Moriarty, which serves the broader kind of East Mountains and Plains area, not all the way out here, and projects like that. So those have been a big focus for us. And so one thing I'll say is that if you are in need of funding or support on the federal level, please contact our office. I know the fire department is still trying to get their fire tanker, and we're gonna figure that one out.
We got it ordered.
Oh, you do? All right, check, we did it. All right, good. All right, well, we did it then, where you did it, Chief. So, but yeah, we're here to help. And it's been a while since I've been able to be back down here, but as I was just saying to the fire chief, the conversations that we have in spaces like this actually do heavily influence the work that we do. Like, for example, one of the things that the fire chief and EMS told us when we were here last time was that there wasn't state funding available for just basic equipment and the issue around EMS pay. And we went back straight to the governor and we're like, we really need you to focus on this. So when you tell us those things, it helps us advocate to other lawmakers who can be helpful and useful. So economic development, the second big area that we heavily focus in my office is around what I call community well-being. So that's everything from, right now, a huge focus on access to healthcare, especially rural healthcare, and especially behavioral health because of the fentanyl crisis. And so a lot of the community project funding we've been bringing home is to help build behavioral health clinics for people to get help if they're struggling with opioids or other addiction issues. And then we do some housing work. We're doing lots of housing work in Albuquerque, and we're also doing lots of stuff around food and hunger. And then the final area that I'll just highlight that we work in is a lot of land and water issues. And we just reintroduced a whole slate of land and water bills with the whole delegation to do watershed protection, working with the land grants, and also a bunch of bills with our tribes. So that's kind of the slate of work that's the good stuff. Now, let me talk about what's happening in Washington. I know we have a lot of people with diverse point of views here today, and so let me say humbly, this is my point of view about what's happening in DC, and we're here to have a discussion and listen, but I want to present to you the facts as I best understand them so that you can help navigate and figure out, especially for our community leaders, what to do about it. So President Trump took office in the middle of January, and he immediately signed a series of executive orders, some of which he had signed previously. Some of them paused stuff that the previous administration was doing, but there was a whole slew of new stuff. And among the things that he signed was a set of executive orders freezing funding for federal programs. And then he brought on Elon Musk, who's a colleague, campaign donor to him, to start the the government Office of Government Efficiency, Department of Government, whatever they're calling it. Now, there's a few things that's important to kind of break down legally about all this to kind of understand how it's impacting our communities. So the Department of Government Efficiency isn't a real department. Congress has to create departments and agencies. That's how the Constitution works. So I'm gonna do just like a quick, back to basics, civics, because it kind of helps explain the current state of affairs. So when the Founding Fathers laid out the Constitution, they were very clear. We had just rejected a monarch, we had the whole Boston Tea Party and the Revolution and all that good stuff. And what the Founding Fathers wanted to do in the Constitution is they didn't ever want the executive branch to be more powerful than the other branches again. That was by design. And so they said, okay, the executive executes the law and administers programs. Congress creates the law because it's the body that represents the people, and then the judicial system enforces the law. We all learned that, we all know that. But what is unusual about what the president is doing is that he's trying to create law from the executive branch, and he can't do that. There are executive orders and memorandums and guidance that you can give to agencies in the execution of the law, but you cannot wholesale create new agencies, dismantle new agencies, freeze their funding, and conduct mass firings of federal employees without going through Congress, because that's how the Founding Fathers set the whole thing up. And so part of why all of you guys are seeing so much chaos unfolding is there's nobody in the world, and certainly not in the United States, that doesn't think the government should be more efficient. Let's be real. And there is a whole set of bipartisan efforts that have been in Congress for a long time but never passed, trying to make the government more efficient, consolidating agencies that duplicated, or we're in, why do we have an agency that does this here, and then, there's a lot in the government that does not make sense. And so I'll be honest, because I worked at OMB for years, I'm actually really interested. I kind of nerd out on this stuff. And so when they launched the Doge effort, and because Elon Musk does have a background in technology, I was interested to see what they could do, and was optimistic, if not skeptical, about how it would all play out. And in the House of Representatives, I serve on the Oversight and Accountability Committee as well as the Natural Resources Committee, and the Republican leadership in the House created a new subcommittee to be the pair of the Doge White House effort. So I'm now the highest ranking Democrat on the DOGE subcommittee in Congress. And initially, the chairperson is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Initially, she and I actually met. We had a good conversation. It was very bipartisan and collegial. And again, you know, I had a dose of skepticism about what we were getting into. And so far, they've only called 4 or 5 hearings, and all of them have been, you know, totally political. Next week, they're calling a hearing. I mean, this is how absurd it's gotten. They're calling a hearing on trans students who are fencers, like literally. Like, this is not a good, you wanna talk about government waste? We're gonna have an entire hearing in the United States Congress about students who fence, who are transgender. I mean, it's like the absurdity level is off the charts. And so it's been a weird time, I'll just say that. This is not normal, right? But inside of the executive branch, because of the separation of powers, the problem has arisen that because these executive orders and the way in which they're trying to carry out the executive design is not followed the Constitution and the law. There's now 170 court cases in the federal court system basically saying you broke the law, you gotta stop doing what you're doing. And so just to kind of outline that in a few different places, you know, one thing that's been really odd about Elon Musk's role is that he came in thinking he could change the government like that without going through Congress and using the same model that you use for a tech startup, and you just can't do that with the US government. It just doesn't work that way. And so he initiated a lot of mass firings by hacking the email system for the federal government, and then sent out these mass emails saying, basically, you're fired for no reason. You can't do that. You can't fire federal employees without cause. That's illegal. So there's a whole set of court cases right now that have resulted in court orders against the administration saying you gotta rehire all these people because you didn't go through the proper process. So one thing I will say is, like, if you're a federal employee or you know a federal employee who got fired in one of these mass firings, contact our office or contact your union, because you have rights and you should be offered your job back if it was done improperly. The second big area that is a source of a lot of litigation right now in the courts is the DOGE effort and the president combined, using executive authority, have tried to shut down whole federal agencies. So they tried to shut down USAID, which is our foreign affairs entity. Right now they have an executive order to shut down Department of Education. They're trying to shut down Consumer Finance Bureau. Again, you can't do that. That's not how the Constitution's written. You just can't. It's just not, that's just not how it works. But they're doing it anyways, and so there's a whole set of court cases that have been brought to say you can't do that, and the courts have said, yeah, you can't do that. So you need to rehire people and put it all back whole again. Now, in spite of those court orders, some of these agencies are continuing to do stuff on the side. So they're still firing people, they're making people feel uncomfortable, they've been holding up grants, etc. And so the third area that I'll mention is the federal funding freezes. All of those are illegal. You can't freeze federal funds without Congress. That's actually directly a violation of law. It's called the Impoundment Act. It was put in place after Richard Nixon, did what he did. And it was very explicit. It was like Congress holds the purse. The executive cannot hold up federal funds that Congress has appropriated. Now, there are now 3 courts that have ordered them to release those funds, and they have not released a lot of funds. So one of the things that we can do as an office to help you out is if you have a grant that's been held up or you have funding that's been held up, contact our office and we'll contact the agency as an advocate for you. And what we have been finding in some cases is that, it's there's this weird kind of cat and mouse thing happening where they took it all away and they're waiting for somebody to complain. So, and then they'll put it back if somebody complains. So if that is the case that you're living with, so please contact us on that. But they also have, mass fired a lot of independent entities. Since we have union folks here, one of the big impacts that they've done is They've tried to dismantle the National Labor Relations Board and the Mediation Board, and the president signed an executive order trying to undercut federal unions. All of that's illegal. The courts are ruling on all that right now. They can't do that. And a lot of these mass firings have also resulted in the unions bringing court cases against the government because of not just the violation of federal personnel laws, but also the union contracts that the government signed with our workers. So there's a lot of restrictions. And the fourth area that I'll highlight, because it's a sort of frequently asked question, is about the data mining that's happening. And I don't know, nor does it matter to me what anyone's political affiliation is, but I don't know a single American that wants the government in their personal data. I mean, that's just basic privacy, right? And so I think all of us, and myself included, have been deeply, deeply disturbed to see this DOGE effort has largely been led with a tech mentality of going in, downloading federal data sets, studying I'm putting it in air quotes, studying these data sets, and then, they're arguing they're using them to make policy changes. If and when that access is appropriate, there's probably a case to be made for that. But what has happened is that they have wholesale downloaded like Social Security data, IRS data, and Treasury data. And in the case of Treasury data, some of that data is actually classified, so that's a criminal offense. You can't download classified data to an external server. Like, that's actually illegal. And in the case of IRS and Social Security data, there are statutes that protect the privacy of Americans, and so they violated those statutes. So there's now multiple court orders in place instructing the administration that they're not allowed to allow outside parties to access your data. The problem is that the data has already been downloaded, so the security breach has already occurred. And so we're gonna have to continue to use the courts to make sure that that data is safe and secure and not improperly used. So all of that kind of leads us to the question, which many of you have asked, is like, well, what next? Because there's so much of this constant chaos and churn happening, it's actually like created a lot of chaos within the government. It's like, am I fired or am I not fired? Is this agency operational or is it not operational? And a lot of the cases that have been filed in the courts are now under appeal. And so the courts are doing their jobs, the courts are enforcing the law, the courts are beginning to be a little bit more using their enforcement mechanisms. As of yesterday, the district court that's involved in this immigration deportation case basically said, you defied our court order. If you don't come in compliance, we're gonna hold you in criminal contempt, which means somebody's going to jail. So, so the courts are definitely getting more aggressive in their enforcement. So that's kind of the current state of affairs with all of this chaos. Now, some of you may feel strongly in support of what the administration is doing, and I respect that. Part of democracy is to have a wide point of view about all these issues. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether you support the vision and ideas, you still gotta follow the law. Like, that's just the basis of how the country works. And so I think that's what's been particularly troubling, and many of my Republican colleagues in the House and Senate are also very disturbed by what they're seeing. But because of the politics of the moment, they're afraid to speak out. But I think you're gonna see more and more Republicans speaking out. People like Lisa Murkowski, there's a whole set of, especially Senate Republicans, that have started speaking out a lot more, partly because they have a little bit more power than House people do. And then just yesterday, we had 12 Republicans send a letter to the speaker saying that they didn't support cutting Medicaid, which is also a big one that's really important. So all of that's kind of where that stands. So let me talk a little bit about the state of affairs in Congress, and going back to kind of the big picture and how we think about, the checks and balances. The founding fathers, like I said that the point of having the people's house was to make sure that we didn't have a king again, and so you have a check over the executive. And right now, The Speaker of the House is not only the same party as the president, he's a close ally with the president. And in the House, it's a very winner-take-all situation. The party in the majority controls everything. They control committees, they control legislation, they control the floor. As you know, it's like, if you're in the minority, it sucks, because it's hard to get your stuff done, right? But it means that because of that allyship that's happening, there's also not checks happening on what would normally there would be checks coming from Congress in both the House and the Senate, and that's just not happening right now. And so a lot of people are asking me, well, what are you doing to stop them? How do you stop them? And I can't stop them, because right now I'm in the minority party and we don't have tools at our disposal to actually stop the things that we disagree with. That's just the nature of the political moment. But what we do have is the ability to visit with our communities, to use our bully pulpit to talk about these issues. And there's a strong effort amongst House members to help support many of the court cases that are happening where our communities have been directly harmed. So we're working closely with the attorney generals and organizations involved in those court cases. And then the final piece that I'll say is there's kind of like 3 legs to this stool, and that's the power of the people. So you got courts, Congress, community. And at the end of the day, the people need to speak, and we need our leaders to listen. And so whether that's the president and his advisors and his cabinet, whether that's members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, we need them to understand that many of the things that they're working on right now are deeply unpopular. And I'll touch on just a few of them, and obviously harming people. I got a lot of questions about Social Security and Medicaid, and these are 2 big ones where speaking up and speaking out is really, really important. Right now, the administration is absolutely undercutting Social Security. They've announced they're firing at least 7,000 people. They're starting to shut regional offices. And obviously all this data breaches are highly concerning. But it's also, there's something like deeper and more disturbing about the whole thing is the lack of transparency. So I went down to the Albuquerque Social Security office earlier this week, and we've always worked with that office. I mean, we have a good relationship with that office. In fact, we do casework to help our seniors and people with disabilities every day, and they denied us entry into the office. And the manager wouldn't even come down and talk to me. She had a security guard come out and hand me a piece of paper that big and told me to call Dallas. I mean, like, that's outrageous, right? I mean, that's like not okay. And some of the workers, some of the union workers inside the building said that it's like completely, there's nobody, like they're supposed to have 600 people working in that office. That's actually a national call center. The Albuquerque one, they answer calls for the whole country when you call Social Security. They're supposed to have 600, they have 250 people right now because so many people have gotten fired or left. So the impacts to Social Security are real. Like call times have doubled. Now people have to go in person if you're elderly or don't have a car, that's a big problem. And I think there's a real risk that if things get worse and worse and worse, people who've wanted to privatize Social Security for a long time will make the argument like, oh look, the government can't do it anymore. And so this is a bipartisan issue. We're gonna fight back against that. And again, they can't do it without Congress. Even the things they're doing right now, they shouldn't be doing without Congress. But there's no way they can whole scale privatize it. The other big issue that I get asked about every day is Medicaid, because it's in the news right now. The kind of only singular legislative agenda that the president has transmitted to Congress that he wants to get done is a big tax package. And like you probably heard it called a bunch of different things, a budget resolution, a tax package, reconciliation. It's basically, it includes a bunch of campaign promises that the president made, including re-upping tax breaks for the ultra wealthy, for corporations. A lot of it's like the 2017 tax breaks. There's some stuff in there that I completely agree with, including they want to end taxation of Social Security benefits. I'm all for that. And if that's all they wanted to put in that package, I would vote for that package. But the problem is that the majority of it is these big tax breaks for like, and these are not people that make $100,000. These are people that are literally billionaires. They don't need a big tax break. And so there are multiple problems with this proposal, and the math is real straightforward. It's gonna cost $7 trillion. So that's how much the tax breaks are that they're gonna give. But normally you're supposed to offset spending, because we all know this, if you spend money you don't have and you do it on a credit card, you end up with a lot of debt, right? And so they have proposed to offset the spending with $2 trillion in offsets. 7 minus 2 does not equal 0. So basically this spending package would blow a hole in the deficit. I mean, just like massive. It would be the largest debt increase in American history. We're talking $37 trillion. And the $2 trillion in cuts include directly instructions to cut Medicaid, SNAP, which is food stamps, housing programs, and a bunch of other social programs. Right now, there's a big fight, discussion, struggle between Senate Republicans and House Republicans over how to handle those cuts. The House Republicans, who tend to be more fiscal hawks, are like, we can't just do all this debt spending without cutting more programs. And so they want even more stuff cut. And the senators are like, you can't cut Medicaid all over the country because it's just gonna hurt everyone. And if they do cut Medicaid, it will hurt New Mexico. And it doesn't matter if you're on Medicaid or not. I mean, raise your hand if you have trouble getting health care in New Mexico. Every single person in this room, myself included. And so what will happen is if they cut Medicaid in New Mexico, every hospital, every clinic, every provider, some portion of their budget is Medicaid. And so, like, they're gonna all go bankrupt, and that means none of us are gonna be able to get health care. So, they have not passed the big package yet. They're trying to get it done by May, and that's why it's really important right now. We're encouraging people to call their members of Congress and say, please don't cut Medicaid. Like, you know, I mean, if there's one thing we have to preserve, it's Medicaid. But I'll put a plug in for SNAP. A lot of people don't realize this, but 1 in 5 New Mexicans are on food assistance. We have the highest rate of hunger in the country for children. And the food banks have been raising the alarm the last few weeks that if they do cut SNAP, and if you're not familiar with SNAP, basically you get like an EBT card. They used to call it food stamps, and that's how you go grocery shopping. It's not a lot of money. It's like $42 a week, right? So it's not like you can buy enough to make a few sandwiches, but especially for people who are super low income, and especially our seniors, like that is what gets them through. And the only other way we can make up that difference is through our food banks providing extra produce and support for people that get their SNAP cut. And so the food banks are saying if they do that, they're gonna bankrupt all the food banks too. So, so we can't let those cuts go through. And like, here's my opinion. I'm like, if at the end of the day, Trump's gonna get his tax package and you're gonna deficit, fund it anyways, just do your dirty business. Do what you're gonna do, but don't cut benefits to our people. That's my opinion. Not that I support that, but like, we can't hurt our people. So like I said, there's still, a month or so till we have to face the big vote on that. I will say this, and since you're here, it's probably helpful, useful information. We're coordinating the delegation talks to the governor once a week. And among the big issues that we're concerned about is like, if the cuts do go through to Medicaid and SNAP, we can't let New Mexico fall through the cracks. And so I know this legislative session, there was a healthcare trust fund set up. There's the opportunity, we still do have a surplus in our budget right now, that we could go back into a special session if the federal cuts go through, that we could fund the health trust fund and food banks to help our families get through the rough times. So, and I know the Republicans have also been advocating here about doing public safety in a special session. So So that is one way in which the state is looking at trying to mitigate some of all of this. So that is kind of the current state of play of what's happening in Washington. I know it's a lot to digest, and I know it's kind of scary and feels uncertain. And I know some of you in here have really strong feelings because you sent me your questions in advance. And so I'm going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. And the one thing that I ask is that just be respectful of each other. We've done now 11 or 12 of these town halls, and we've had a couple where like people heckled each other, and I'm like, that's not cool. Everyone should be able to share their own point of view. That's why we do these things. So I want to hear from all of you guys. So with that, why don't I open it up for questions if anyone has any questions? Yeah.
So we all know the turmoil because we hear it on the news and the media and everything that goes on. And how can me and you as political people help places like Fort Sumner? I mean, the needs of this community are great all the time because they don't have the tax base like Clovis or maybe Albuquerque or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, putting all politics aside, between me and you is how can federal and state, come together. We know the challenges that we're facing at the state level. If the federal part of it, some of the scariest that we hear happens, New Mexico is gonna hurt real bad because we've already seen the oil prices go down, and that's what President Trump said he was gonna work on. And then after he would get the oil prices down, and then he feels like the economy will come back into check, where we don't see the high grocery prices, the high cost of living and everything. But even in this session in Santa Fe, the chatter was, if they cut Medicaid and they cut all these other programs, New Mexico's in trouble.
Yes.
So my concerns are, how can we help our communities and I really don't think anything's really that bad right now, hurting. I don't hear it from my part. Of course, we just came out of the session, and I tell people I just came out of jail.
It does feel that way.
Served a 60-day term, but
the last few days are rough.
But I think we need to keep a close relationship with our people as we represent them, and try to make it a soft landing if things are gonna change. And a lot of times we see the money being the most important thing, but really there's a lot of other things that we do that are important also.
Yeah. Yes.
So do you on your side of it see the funding coming in to the state of New Mexico being cut immediately, or is this in a year or two, or how do you see that?
So yeah, first and foremost, absolutely. And I didn't realize that you were the rep for Fort Sumner, and now I'm glad to know that. So let me start with not the, like, if the bad stuff happens, but just like, let's pretend we were in normal times. One of the things that I've been trying to do a lot with with mayors and county commissioners and first responder organizations is to think about kind of like what the funding cycle might look like. So we do have the capacity at the congressional level to submit for earmarks, which is similar to capital outlay, but because the federal funding situation is so chaotic, it's not a sure bet. And then the other thing is the time frame that it takes to get a community funded project. And in the House, we only get 15 projects, and then in the Senate, they can ask for as many as they want. So let me just say this, if there is a big project that Fort Sumner or the fire department or EMS wanna pursue, or in any other part of your district, we can help provide technical assistance and work with our senators to get your funding request put through Congress. There's no guarantee it'll get funded because you gotta pass a budget, and Congress hasn't passed a budget in a while. So that's kind of the problem. But, I mean, it's a good tool if you get it. Like for Moriarty, we were able to get the entire fire department funded in one swoop. But in terms of working with the legislature, you know, the legislature only gets like a little bit of money for capital outlay. And so like a good way to think about it, but you guys release the funds a lot quicker. So like is to put forward, like if you have a small project or you want to plan for a bigger project, go to the legislature and get capital outlay for that, and then submit for the funding to build it, the millions that you need to build it through Congress. Does that make sense? So you kind of think about it from a project management, financial standpoint in that way. And the New Mexico delegation, we're in the middle of hiring a new grants person, but we actually have a grant finder who will help look for federal grant programs. And I will say, even in the midst of all this chaos, the Trump administration has started unfreezing some of those grant programs. Not all of them, but some of them. So they've started to put out requests for proposals for like road projects and things like that. So there's that, but they are still holding back a lot of the bipartisan infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Act money, which does impact our communities because it's like utilities money and certain road funding. And a lot of that would either go directly to the town or the utility, or it would go through the state Department of Transportation or the state healthcare budget. And so that's where we start to run into like big problems where they're holding back funding. And so one thing that I'll say, and we're working with the governor on this, but if you hear from somebody in your district that's like our whatever funding got frozen, please call us right away because we'll go track that down. And we may be able to get them to release the funds. But your point, or your question or point about the bigger piece, yeah, I mean, there's kind of like the macro level, like if they cut Medicaid, like there's just no way New Mexico cannot survive without Medicaid. And the governor is prepared, like I said, to have a special session to put into place a stopgap to fund Medicaid. And to kind of think about it this way, so before they did Affordable Care Act, there was about 250,000 people in New Mexico who were uninsured. And what they put in place was called Medicaid expansion. And basically, New Mexico has opted in. So we opted in, and then Congress made it mandatory last year. So that 250,000 people is getting their health care because of Medicaid expansion. That's what they want to cut. So that's 250,000 New Mexicans that lose their health care overnight. So we can't let that happen. And we can't let it happen for our healthcare system, and we can't let it happen to those people. What the governor told us, but I haven't looked at the money, is that there should be enough funding in the state surplus to fund that Medicaid expansion population for 3 years to get us through the administration, if that is what happens. But then the problem is you're drawing down the surplus for the state, which is not a good thing. But I mean, that's the like break the glass scenario. So that's kind of what happens. But in the meantime, you know, especially on a bipartisan basis, you know, you guys can call me. I'm happy to take the calls, but I'm never gonna vote to cut Medicaid or Social Security. That's just nothing, I'll never do that. But especially if you're a Republican, if you're involved in any of the like state legislative organizations, like raise this issue with Republican organizations and members of Congress and leaders and with the party itself, because there's a lot of disinformation kind of coming through the airwaves. Like even when we took the vote last week, the speaker told his own members that it wouldn't cut Medicaid, and it was written in the bill. It was in the bill. It said cut $880 billion out of energy and commerce budget, which is Medicaid. Like, so we gotta kind of combat the misinformation, and I think like the medical community has been really good, like our hospitals have been doing a lot of lobbying, doctors associations, but I think elevating it through like the Republican Party and through organizations is like an impactful thing, because like nobody can afford it. It's not a thing we should do. The other thing that you'll hear that's kind of a misinformation thing is like Mike Johnson keeps saying like, oh, we're just gonna make sure that, you know, able-bodied working men who should just get a job don't get health care and food stamps. Well, that's not what they have written in the bill. That's like, we have the roadmap of what they were gonna cut. And so it's just not truthful. It's just misinformation. So those are things that we can do. But on the individualized basis, I mean, anything you guys need, I'm looking at the mayor, call us, we'll work with you.
I can tell you one thing, and this is my second term.
Yeah.
And I've worked with Martin and, you know, two different parties, but he really cares about Nebraska County and
Yep.
Fort Sumner a lot.
Yes.
And I work real good with him, and now Senator Boone, you know, and before him it was, Stuart Ingalls for years, different parties. So, you know, the way I look at it around here is they really care about our community as well, like we all care about our community.
Yes.
Your office has been very helpful. I think that's where I'd like to kind of see things. One thing that I hear from a lot of the people I talk to is that was their biggest concern, is Social Security and Medicaid.
Yeah.
You know, our community is part of like 90% already in the age, if not in the age of getting Social Security, and that's what they're worried about.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, one thing that we can certainly do, my staff are happy to come out and table anytime in the community. And we could do, you know, we can just bring our caseworkers here, and if we can advertise it, if people are having Social Security issues or Medicaid issues, or a lot of our casework is veterans work as well, so people having trouble with the VA. So that's one way. We can also do it as like a Zoom clinic, so if people have access to the internet, we can also do it that way. So yeah, happy to help out. And then, you know, actually one of the things that's been good about these town halls is like, we've done so many now, it's like the same questions, and so I think one thing that would be good for us is to like put frequently asked questions like online, and we can distribute that so that you guys can answer questions too. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a not so frequently asked.
Yeah.
We have a Bureau of Reclamation dam
Yep.
north of town.
Yep.
And they're trying to work on the gates that have been there since the 1930s. And so the dam is in a ravine, obviously. And so right now, the only access across the dam to the community that's there, and the ranches and the other people that live west of the lake, is over the dam. The weight limit has been reduced on that passage for several times now. It's down to 15 tons. We can't legally take a trash truck across it, although we do. Cattle trucks come across it. Fire trucks, Farmers Electric, I mean, you name it, they're exceeding the dam limit. So their solution is put in a temporary bridge that's owned by the Department of Transportation State, and then build a permanent crossing. That thing is not funded, and they have no hope for it to be funded. Bureau of Reclamation.
Brenda,
They,
do you have any updates on it? Because we submitted a funding request for that on the bridge for the dam.
I don't have an update.
Okay, yeah, so.
Constance from Senator Lujan's office
Yeah.
has been watching it carefully too.
Yeah, so there was, the delegation submitted a letter of support to deal with the dam issues, and Senator Lujan's office has been leading that effort, so we'll follow up and get back to you.
I mean, we've been told by the Bureau of Reclamation that they were turned down for the funding.
We'll have to follow up on it, so we'll follow up and find out what's going on.
What we don't want to do is interrupt the installation of the temporary bridge by the DOT, because that's better than what we have now.
Yeah.
That's 10 times better than what we have.
Because I can't answer specific questions about the project, I think we should schedule a follow-up meeting with Senator Lujan's office and the Bureau to find out what the status of all that is, if that's okay with you. But it is something that we have been working on and the senator's office has been the lead on, so.
And one more thing, in the last information we got from BOR, they said they have done 30% of the planning and design for permanent crossing, but they have halted that right there because they're out of funding and they don't anticipate getting additional funding.
Well, we'll follow up, and there may be other sources of funding if it's like some incremental cost difference, so we'll look at it. We'll see what we can do. And actually, if they did not get internal funding, we have 2 weeks till the submissions for community funded projects are due. We should prep something for the community funded projects to submit to the senators if that is a need that's unfunded. So I'm gonna have you follow up with Brenda on the details of it, if that's okay. Partly because we're actually already 10 minutes over time because we have to get back on the road. But is there other questions? Yeah, why don't I take all 3 of these? 1, 2, 3, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'm curious about the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
I'll
Will-
repeat it. I'll repeat it. Go ahead. I'll repeat the question. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious about how IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, will function if it's not managed by the Department of Education.
Yep.
All right, so he's asking about the program that provides federal oversight over educational, sorry, can I get some water? I'm getting dehydrated in here. Thank you. The federal Department of Justice is responsible for enforcing the compliance with the federal laws for accommodations for students who need learning accommodations. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, next question, and I'll just take all the last remaining questions, try to hit them all at the same time. Go ahead.
Donald Gallegos, SMART. What I have to say or ask directly affects the community of Fort Sumner because you have this railroad running through here. As far as I know, we still don't have an FRA agent, which means there's nobody paying attention to how the inspections are done on these trains. It's a pending, it's a doom and gloom, something's gonna happen soon. It's already happened twice in New Mexico that caused evacuations, and it goes right through your town. Just over in Vaughn, you have 2 railroads going through there. The New Mexico Railroad Commission is non-existent. When I call them, and Clem here can give you insight on them, we only take care of NMRX. When they used to have an agent that would assist the FRA. When he tried to get hired by the FRA, his interview consisted of, well, the guy that I talked to when we spoke, said we need a bilingual agent. Me being the smart ass that I am, I says, well, what does he need to speak? Tewa, Tiwa, Towa, Navajo, what? He didn't like that. Well, the agent that was interviewed passed the test. Come time to be hired, they did not offer him the pay to be a bilingual speaker. So he went on to the Department of Energy where he was already working. This was a knowledgeable guy, G-Corp qualified, that could come through and say, railroads, you're not doing this right. We don't want to hurt the railroads. Neither one of us do. We want them to run more and more trains, but we want them to do it safely. Your communities are at risk. If you can get that railroad commission going again, where they'll come out and actually do some inspections, somebody that's qualified. G-Corp qualified, knows something about hazardous material. They had one guy from New Mexico environmental go out to the derailment in Monolito. They had to evacuate that community. We need somebody out here. I know they're talking about cuts. The agent that was interviewed was relieved that he didn't take the job because he'd be gone at this time. I mean, we needed help, and I'm glad you paid attention to that.
Yep.
And I know you have a lot on your plate, but your community here is at risk.
So is that a federal employee or a
It's a
state?
federal.
Both, there's a state entity, Clem's pretty well versed on that, on the state agency. He knows all about that.
So I'm gonna take this question and then this question, and then if there's any last questions, we gotta get on the road after this. I apologize.
When you visited us the last time that I attended, it was down at the library, and at that time, I stated that the NASA balloon facility is located here at the airport. and that I encourage you to support that program. It seems to me that that could be low-hanging fruit, and yes, we are a ranching and farming community, but that is an entity that we have no idea what that impacts as far as income to the community.
Thank you.
So, if you can maintain it, so be it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And then,
We wanted to say thank you. We appreciate all of your help and hard work on a lot of our issues, and spearheading the letter to Union Pacific's CEO this past year was actually really big. The problem we keep running into that Mr. Gallegos has alluded to is every time we try and work on any kind of rail safety legislation at the state level, as Representative Zamora can attest to, we always hear federal preemption. Federal preemption, federal preemption. And I know that you have a stance that you've worked out towards this, but we've got to get moving on that, because if you were to have the same type of event that happened out at Manuelito at the west end of the state happen right here, Fort Sumner would no longer exist, and you don't have the resources to be able to do anything for it. The closest first responders that could handle any type of major event in this state would maybe Las Cruces, maybe Albuquerque, maybe. Cannon Air Force Base. Okay, but they're an hour away, hour and a half away?
65 miles, yeah, it's still.
But still, by then it's too late. So we need something at the federal level, because I'm tired of fighting with these lobbyists at the state level that can grossly outgive, outdo, outshine any of our efforts. And all I have is to be able to come in and recount the stories of what our members face. So at the federal level, we have to get moving on rail safety, because you have all of these communities that are dotted along the various railroads, that if something catastrophic were to happen, like an East Palestine type event, that community would fail to exist any further.
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna maybe go in reverse order, because the last one's a little more complicated to explain. I just saw you hand a piece of paper to Brenda, so hopefully that lays out the case.
She's at the notes.
All right, done. That's what I was gonna suggest. Send us the information. We're happy to advocate for programs that are important locally. And if there's other programs that you're concerned are gonna disappear or be impacted, proactively telling us is super helpful, because we can actually proactively advocate to the administration and say, this is a really important program, please don't cut it. In terms of rail safety, I mean, you already know this, Congress is like at an impasse right now around rail safety, and the problem is not a Republican-Democrat problem, it's a House versus Senate problem. We have a huge bipartisan rail safety package that my rail safety bill was included in. And the people carrying that is like opposite sides of the ideological spectrum. We've got like super progressives and super conservatives. And the House is like, yeah, let's do this. Why are we sitting on this? But things have stalled out in the Senate, in the Committee of Jurisdiction. So we need to give the senators a kick in the pants to get that jump started again. And unfortunately, this seems to be one of those things where it's like, anytime there's another accident, everyone's like, what are we doing to solve the problem? And it's like, we already have a bill, just pass the damn bill. So the problem is we need to be lobbying the Senate. I highly encourage any of our unions or workers to really engage senators on both sides of the aisle, because that's the only way we're gonna get it done. And I mean, shoot, if we can get Senator Thune, who's the current leader, Republican leader, on board, then we can get some traction, because if they pass it in the Senate, we will pass it in the House.
The problem with Senator Thune, though, is his work history before he was elected, because he was a lobbyist for the railroads.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
We're screwed.
damn politics, as they call it, right? So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, people gotta keep working him. I mean, at the end of the day, he serves his members as well, so if there's enough Republican members that are like, we gotta do this, I think the dam will break on that. We don't want dams breaking, by the way. No pun intended. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm 100% with you. In terms of getting an FRA person here, you know, we wrote a letter to try to get somebody hired after the Gallup accident. And my office, we can re-engage with them to look for another person. I don't know what the current status is with that agency. I don't think the administration's found them yet. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
But-
Fleming's gonna work for Amtrak, he'd be a good inspector, I'd recommend him right
Oh,
now.
okay.
You're willing to do it,
There you go.
Want to do it?
No.
But I will say we deal with a lot of rail issues across the state because we are a big crossroads. So contact my office if you're having issues with the feds, you're having issues with the railroads, you're having worker disputes like that. We do actually a lot of work on this stuff. And that even includes municipal stuff, like we're working with Carrizozo right now. They have a rail crossing that's really unsafe and we're working with DOT to get it fixed. So, and then IDEA. Congress passed a law that requires that that all public school districts across the country provide reasonable accommodations for students that need them, who are on a plan. You know this, but others might not. So that includes, like, if you have a learning challenge, like you're struggling with reading, or if you maybe have a hearing disorder or something like that. All of that requires federal compliance, and all the school districts are required to comply with it. The IDEA, the Civil Rights Act, is another huge federal law. I mean, the Department of Education exists because of the Civil Rights Movement, because across the United States, children were not being given equitable access to education. Here in New Mexico, it's in our Constitution. We say every kid has a right to an equitable education. But the key role of Department of Education is to enforce federal law through their Civil Rights Division. And I actually had the opportunity to meet with the new Secretary of Education 2 weeks ago, Linda McMahon, and her point of view, which she's executing on under Trump's executive order, is to send it to the states. And we had a very frank conversation with her. There were 12 of us who met with her. And we said, first of all, in a state like New Mexico, there's real structural problems because we don't have the staffing, we don't have the capacity, and we don't have the statutory requirement to do it. How are we gonna do that? We don't even meet till next January, right? So if you try to send this whole thing to the states, it's not gonna happen, right? I mean, we might be able to pass a backstop, but this isn't a funding issue. This is actually like a statutory issue. We would have to have state enforcement to do that. And also, this is a federal thing because we want all kids to have access to public education. So she acted very surprised when I said there are states that can't do this. She was like, oh, like I had never thought about that. So, but I mean, it is her mandate. That's what the president has tasked her with doing, is dismantling Department of Education and sending it to the states. We have a similar issue with tribes. Like, there a lot of Department of Education programs serve tribes. That's a federal function. There's no state function there. It doesn't exist. So, you know, I go back to what I was saying a minute ago. They may have this point of view, but they still can't do it without changing the law because they don't have the statutory authority to do that. But I think the answer to your question is it won't get enforced if it goes to the states, because some states will do a good job if they have to, and some states won't at all. And this is also the problem with the Civil Rights Act. If you think that states in the Deep South are gonna like make sure that kids in really low income communities of color are gonna get an equitable education, no, that is not gonna happen. That is why we have federal civil rights enforcement. So I think one of the things that's really important right now is that, you know, it's like the president campaigned on it. He said it at all his rallies, like, I'm gonna get rid of Department of Education because it's just bureaucratic blue. But I don't think people who aren't inside the system understand what that meant. You can't get rid of some of these programs. So the answer is we're gonna fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. And I can guarantee you, based on the Senate House dynamics, a lot of Republican senators have already said they're not gonna vote for dismantling Department of Ed. So I don't think it's gonna happen, but I will say this on the individual side, which goes back to the conversation we were just having. If you have a student or a school that is being impacted, please contact us. And I would say this in general, if you hear this from your schools, because a lot of schools got these letters from the Department of Education, they're called Dear Colleague letters. A lot of public schools are totally freaked out right now because the letter said, if you don't comply with all this stuff, we're gonna cut your funding. And a lot of our tiny local schools, they don't know, right? Like, you get a scary letter and you're a local principal, you don't know that, like, actually they can't do that, and you're not gonna go hire a corporate lawyer to defend you. And so some of the schools have already started pulling back on things, even though they don't have to, because they just don't know. So if that is happening here, if you're hearing complaints from parents, please let us know, because we can help put them in touch with people at PED to like know what their rights are. So I'm looking at you because I'm sure you hear from the principals and the school board and stuff like that. And same, if you hear from schools, please let them know to call us. So I gotta get on the road. Thank you guys so much for getting